and I think he is pissed off. Oh, The Undertaker! Oh no, Batista! Did he win over? Oh, he went over! As we head into the release of brand new wrestling games, something that I like to do often is revisit some of the classic games, such as SmackDown Here Comes the Pain, the SmackDown Vs Raw series, and so on, that we regard as being some of the best wrestling games ever. But in the mix of that, there's some wrestling games like WWE Legends of WrestleMania that doesn't really live up to that classic feel. So let's go ahead and talk about 5 weird details that arguably made that game one of the worst WWE games ever. And as we get into it, consider turning on those notifications and subscribing to the channel to not miss any of our WWE games content, WWE 2K22 coverage, and so on. WWE Legends of WrestleMania came out at a very interesting time for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, releasing on March of 2009, so ready for that WrestleMania that year. And the concept of it was very simple. It was of course to feature legends of WWE who have appeared at WrestleMania in the 1980s and the 1990s. So releasing the game around WrestleMania was obviously a great move, with WrestleMania 25 happening that same month. But with how the game was received, Metacritic giving it a 70 out of 100, GameSpot with a 5 out of 10 rating, IGN with a 6.5 out of 10, seeing all that score and how everything ended up playing out, you probably wouldn't believe that this was a THQ game. And why that was the case? Well, the first thing is probably has to do with the gameplay. Although the game had an arcadey style to it, it was very limited. With basic controls, only the D-pad or left analog stick and the 4 face buttons needed on the gamepad. They obviously wanted to go with a retro feel to it, sort of like WWF WrestleFest. But the problem here was that a game like this following SmackDown vs Raw 2009 didn't go well, especially with this type of gameplay. You had the strikes, the quick grapple, the blocking, which is not that crazy if there was some extra combination to all of it. A lot of times once you get into a grapple, you will have to go on and do a quick animation. Think of it as doing a comeback for everything that you do in current games. It is one button after the other. If you're doing the Hulk Hogan leg drop, get ready to smash 3 buttons before you end up dropping that leg drop, even though it should have been a bit more simpler. Again, that quick action retro feel just didn't fit in after the action-packed SmackDown vs Raw 2009 game, which we got just a couple of months before that. Personally, I enjoyed the gameplay style presentation, at least the camera angles that we got, because it is different, it's right in your face. But just going through a matchup and having to do so many quick actions, so many button smashing to even get up from the floor, and having a bar for almost everything that you had to do, made the experience not as enjoyable. Just going from one move or one grapple to the next didn't feel smooth at all. Even running in this game was limited, as all you had to do was left, right, up, or down, which means that if your opponent was in a weird position towards you were headed to, you definitely was gonna miss him. We mentioned SmackDown vs Raw 2009 a lot, and that leads us to the next weird detail or problem in this game, and that is that it simply felt like it was just a spin-off or an extra DLC addition to the game. This game had a lot of legends because that was its focus. Now granted, it didn't have Macho Man, so that was a big disappointment for me right away. But if you didn't buy SmackDown vs Raw 2009, that means that this game roster was gonna be less than 50 superstars, less than 50 legends, and there was no current superstars in it. If you really wanted to get the most out of this game, you were basically forced to buy SmackDown vs Raw 2009, because having that game meant that you were able to import the roster of that game into this. Now of course the concept sounds great, and it was a really good marketing strategy for THQ, but I would hate to do something like that in the newer games, where I would need to get a previous game in order to enjoy the full roster from that game in the newer one. It's definitely something I really don't want to go through. That, and also the lack of content, made WWE Legends of WrestleMania felt like it was just a Legends expansion to SVR09. And let's look at that lack of content. For the creation mode, it was basically the same as 09, with even some features missing missing from it. I do appreciate that you were able to import your creator wrestler from 09 into this game, much like the rest of the roster. But there wasn't really a point for you to do that because you were not going to be playing season mode. You were not going to be entering some general manager mode, putting him into Road to WrestleMania or so on. Because in this game, when it comes to the single player aspect of the game, you were going to be doing one or two things. You were going to be reliving some of the older WrestleMania matches, or you will be doing the Legend Killer mode that they have. Unfortunately, these modes didn't really have the content that I bet a lot of new players were looking for. You could relive, rewrite, or redefine some of the older WrestleMania matches in the WrestleMania Tour mode. It was cool that you could rewrite the history, you know, play as the loser and win the match or do some challenges throughout. But again, if it turned out that you didn't like the gameplay style to begin with, this was gonna be a pain to do, and it wasn't really that rewarding. You get a video clip to, of course, refresh your memory on these feuds and older rivalries, and you will go on to do it. In the other mode, as we said, they will give you different challenges, they will change it up a bit, or ultimately just give you the opportunity of a different outcome. It would have been better if it was sort of like a what if. What if The Undertaker Street was defeated at this earlier WrestleMania? What would have happened after that? For the Legend Killer mode, it sounds great, but it was basically that you use a creator wrestler, you go through some legends, and you build up the rank for you to become a Hall of Famer yourself. The other mode that was in this was just Hall of Fame, which wasn't really a mode. It was more something so that you could keep track of what you have done. So it had the stats for the other two modes. And while you might be thinking, well, Exhibition should be great because it's an older game and of course all of the classic matchups are gonna be there, right? But no, THQ actually wanted to live up to the 1980s and the 1990s, which meant that Exhibition, the match types that we got in it, were very limited. All those match types, you can see it right here in this one screen. We have singles matches, cage matches, ladder matches, Hell in a Cell, Iron Man matches, submission match, tag team match, a triple threat match, a battle royal, handicap match, and Royal Rumble. At least for the Royal Rumble, we got the 10, the 20, and the 30-man options. But even that match, which was the best thing to do in this game, had its own type of disappointments. Again, for Exhibition, this was really a disappointment, especially for a THQ game, who kept on giving us a lot of the things that we wanted year to year. Inferno matches, special referee matches, I Quit, Very Alive matches, First Blood, and so on. And you will think that because you could import the full roster of SmackDown Vs Raw 2009 into this game, that maybe that will import all of those classic matches as well from that game. But it didn't, and that turned out to be a disappointment, because now you're dealing with a different type of gameplay, and on top of that, an Exhibition mode that is missing a lot of the matches that you love to play. Talking about these matches, there were some awkward moments in many of these, and definitely some questionable type of gameplay. For the ladder match, for example, you were always grabbing the world title, even if that ladder match ended up being for the Intercontinental Championship. Then at the end, the cutting actually switches and do portray the correct title for that match. That presentation in itself was just weird, and it just felt lazy, as if they just didn't finish the rest of it. The Royal Rumble is probably the match that I remember the most, and it's usually one of the most fun ones. But in this game, you could stumble off the ring and get eliminated just way too easy. If you're too close to the ropes and a superstar happens to strike you, chances are he's gonna send you over the top rope without really doing much. That Irish whip is the most devastating thing. If you happen to be by the rope and somebody try to grab you out of it, you will do a mini game of button smashing, and you might win it the first time, but the second time that they put you in it is pretty much over. Or they could just knee you right in the face and it's over, and you're not able to reverse none of that. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below of WWE Legends of WrestleMania. Definitely a throwback, but not as classic as many of the older WWE games that we love to go back and play. As always, guys, for more, make sure to turn on those notifications and subscribe to the channel. I'll catch you on the next one, so stay savage.